Good morning. We're glad that you are with us this morning. We are very familiar with the terms America as a Christian nation being founded on, quote, biblical principles, but we are rather selective in which biblical principles we mean by that. For example, if someone smites you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. Do not resist an evil person. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth. Those are all biblical principles, in fact, spoken by Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount. But could a nation function if they followed primarily by the Sermon on the Mount? Could a nation really turn the other cheek? How can a nation be a Christian nation while it ignores Jesus' most basic ethical teaching? The church was born into an era where it was persecuted by nations. In 1 Peter 1 and verse 17, since you call on a Father who judges each person's work impartially, live out your time here as foreigners in reverent fear. Christians were outsiders and outcasts in a world that was not their own. They were strangers in a world. Dear friends, I urge you as foreigners and exiles to abstain from sinful desires which wage war against the soul. Christians didn't fit in the values and standards and principles of the nations of the world. They seemed like aliens and foreigners. They were strangers in the world, which is pretty much the deal that God's people have always had. In Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 13, all these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them at a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth. That if you're seeking the things of God, sometimes you don't fit into the values and value the things of this earth as you're seeking the things of God. We just don't fit in so well to the world around us. And if we do, if we find ourselves fitting hand in glove into the world, then maybe we are on the wrong track, the wrong road. No, to follow God is to not fit into the world. We find ourselves strangers on earth. We find ourselves outcasts. Which brings us back to the series we've been looking at over the past 11 or 12 weeks, meeting the people that Jesus met in Luke. Luke had this real interest in outcasts, people on the fringes. He shows Jesus meeting shepherds and lepers and women and tax collectors. Even when Jesus is in polite society eating with Pharisees, his meal is interrupted by a sinful woman who anoints his feet. Luke is interested in people that other people just aren't interested in. Well, the last couple of weeks we've taken a little bit of a detour in Luke 8 as Jesus is interrupted in his teaching by his family, and we looked at a very interesting story there. They weren't really outcasts. And then Jesus calmed the storm, and because of the storm that we're going through with the COVID-19 pandemic, we looked at that. But not really an outcast story, although he's on the way to the story we're looking at this morning. The story today is about a man who really was an outcast. So as we look at the story of the demoniac of the Gerasenes, let's just read the text together from Luke 8. Kurt, read that for us.
They sailed to the region of the Gerasenes, which is across the lake from Galilee. When Jesus stepped ashore, he was met by a demon-possessed man from the town. For a long time this man had not worn clothes or lived in a house, but had lived in the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell at Jesus' feet, shouting at the top of his voice, "What do you want from me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had commanded the evil spirit to come out of the man. Many times it had seized him, and though he was chained hand and foot and kept under guard, he had broken his chains and had been driven by the demon into solitary places. Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "Legion," he replied, because many demons had gone into him, and they begged him repeatedly not to order them to go into the abyss, which is hell. A large herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside. The demons begged Jesus to let them go into them, and he gave them permission. When the demons came out of the man, they went into the pigs, and the entire herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and was drowned.
The man at the center of this story is an outcast in every sense of that word. He doesn't even have a name. Well, he probably did. We just don't know what it is. So we call him the demoniac of the Gerasenes. That's just kind of the name we referred to him as. He didn't really print that up on his business cards, I'm sure, but that's what we usually call him. How would you like to be known by your biggest failure of your life? Go down all through history being called the tax evader of Tidewater, or the perjurer of the peninsula, or the dummy of Denbigh who locked his keys in his car. As we'll see, he really does at the end of the story end up in a very good place, but that doesn't matter. We still call him the demoniac of the Gerasenes. We'll give him a new name later on in the lesson. When the story begins, he's not in a good place at all. He's demon-possessed. We don't know much about what that really means about demon possessions. We could spend a lot of time talking about demons, and we still wouldn't know a lot about demon possession. We do know from the story that he was possessed by more than one demon, and we have to assume that that's a whole lot worse than being possessed by just one demon. His life was made miserable because of Satan. He couldn't be bound, although they tried to, and he broke the chains. He couldn't be clothed, although we assume that he tried to do that. They tried to put clothes on him, but he ran around naked. The demons drove him to live in solitary places, so he lived among the tombs, which was appropriate. His life was a grave. That's what Satan does. He drives us into hiding. Remember what happened after the very first sin? When Adam and Eve sinned, the very first thing they did was they tried to hide from God. In Genesis 3 and verse 8, when the man and his wife heard the sound of the Lord God was walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and they hid from the Lord God among the trees of the garden. Sin led Adam and Eve to hide from God. Didn't work real well for them, but that's what sin does. It separates. It drives us into hiding. It drove them from God's presence. It drove them from the Garden of Eden. It also drove them into a solitary place in their relationship. As God pronounces the consequences of sin, it would bring pain and childbearing for Eve, but also your desire will be for your husband and he will rule over you. Their relationship would become one of power struggle. The perfect unity that they enjoyed in paradise would be destroyed by rule and dominion. That's what sin does. It destroys relationships. It separates us from God and from others, from our true self. What was the demoniac's life like before the demons destroyed him? We don't know. What we do know is life became a true wreck. That's what Satan does to all of our lives if we allow it, if we follow his lead, if we listen to his lies. Demons in the Gospels are smarter than humans. Not smarter in the sense that they pick the right side, but smarter in the sense that they always recognize Jesus. Humans have a hard time picking up on that, but not the demons. Demons always recognize Jesus. They always believe in Jesus right away. Remember, James is going to say in his epistle, the demons believe and shudder. In Luke 8:28 here, what do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, don't torture me. For Jesus had commanded the impure spirit to come out of the man. Well, the demons do more than just believe and shudder. They believe and leave. The man is set free from the demons. Where do demons go when they're cast out? Well, here they beg Jesus not to be sent back to the abyss. The word abyss means the pit or the realm of the dead. It's used here, it's used once in Romans, and then used 7 times in the book of Revelation for Satan's domain. It's where Satan is going to be locked up for 1,000 years. The last time it's used in Revelation 20. That's why the demons didn't want to be sent back there. And so the interesting story is there's a herd of pigs and they're sent into the pigs. I'm not sure exactly what to do with that part of the story. I mean, after all, I'm a Razorback fan and I really enjoy bacon, so I have a hard time believing that Jesus had anything against hogs. He really doesn't send the demons into the hogs. He permits them to go. The hogs are drowned in the lake and they only have one place to go after that, and that's back to the place where they didn't want to go. But the real point of the story is what happens after the pigs drowned. So let's continue with our reading in Luke 8. Brady?
When those tending pigs saw what had happened, they ran off and reported this in the town and countryside. And the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they found the man from whom the demons had gone out, sitting at Jesus' feet, dressed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people how the demon-possessed man had been cured. Then all the people of the region of the Gerasenes asked Jesus to leave them, because they were overcome with fear. So he got into the boat and left. The man from whom the demons had gone out begged to go with him. But Jesus sent him away, saying, "Return home and tell how much God has done for you." So the man went away and told all over town how much Jesus had done for him.
The story changes completely here because the demoniac changes. In fact, he's not the demoniac of the Gerasenes anymore, so he needs a new name. So we're going to call him Jerry, after the Gerasenes. He's not in a solitary place anymore. He sits there in his right mind, in polite company. He's freshly bathed. He's got a fresh haircut, so he looks better than I do at this point. His life is completely changed, and everybody there sees the complete change. A couple of things stand out here. First, the people there, the people of the Gerasenes, begged Jesus to leave, to leave their area. Well, okay, maybe they're still mad about the pigs, but I think it might go deeper than that. The text says they're afraid when they see the man in his right mind. They're afraid because their status quo has been rattled. They didn't want to see this kind of dramatic change in themselves. Here Jesus is rattling their, making these dramatic changes. It's just easier to ask him to leave, because if Jesus keeps changing things, he may end up changing them. So let's just ask him to go. The second thing is that Jesus asked Jerry to work at home. He's going to be a disciple, but he wants him to disciple from home. Many of us are working from home, so Jerry is going to be working from home. In the next chapter, Jesus is turned down by three men to be disciples. At least they want to negotiate the conditions. Yeah, I'll be your disciple, but let me go home and bury my dad first. You know, that story. Jerry wants to follow Jesus, but Jesus sends him back home. He's going to tell the story, but he's going to tell the story to his family, friends, the guy down the block. Jesus wants Jerry to be a disciple, to follow him, but he's going to bloom where he's planted. He's going to be a disciple back home. We're never going to meet anyone who was any more of an outcast than was this man. His life was a total wreck before he met Jesus. Demon-possessed, shunned. He lived in the solitary places. There was nothing good in him until he was touched by grace. Now see, we have enough good in us where we can be confused. We have talent, we have resources, we're good looking. Not Jerry, not the demoniac of the Gerasenes. When Jerry was saved, it took an act of divine grace. When he sat there all dressed and neat, it wasn't about him. We get confused. We're basically good people, you and I. So we get confused by our obedience, our worship, our works. Jerry wasn't confused at all. It had nothing to do with him. It was all about Jesus all of the time. Nothing in my hand I bring, simply to the cross I cling. So Jerry had no problem at all with Jesus' command. He didn't have to go through all the excuses that we sometimes go through and we're asked to go and tell, right? He wasn't embarrassed. He spent years running around naked. He wasn't embarrassed to go down the block to tell people about Jesus. He wasn't afraid to talk to people. They had been afraid of him. He wasn't leery to go out in places by himself. He was used to the solitary places. None of those things were on his radar at all. All he knew is that he owed Jesus everything. Before Jesus, he was enslaved and an outcast. Because of Jesus, he was given his life back. To Jerry, lost was not some theological abstraction. And in the same way, being saved was every bit as real. So what has God done for you? We're all like Jerry. Or rather, we're the demoniac of the Gerasene. We're all outcasts. Our lostness is not a theological abstraction either. We're all hopeless. without salvation as a free gift that we don't deserve and can't earn. We're just in the same state as this demoniac was. We're the property of Satan. Like Jerry, because we've been saved, we're under the debt of the one who has set us free. And now God tells us to go and share his goodness with others by how we live, by the fruit that we bear, by the words that we speak. We are to share what God has done for us. So what about you? What has God done for you?